Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Azure Resource Manager template. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the folks joining from different parts of the globe. My name is Noor Basha, Marketing Director at Winwire Technologies, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. As you know, today we are going to talk on how you can work with Azure Resource Manager templates, where we will introduce ARM, its benefits, and some of the deployment options that are available. Before we start, let me highlight a few housekeeping items. As you can see, most of them are available on the screen, but a couple of them is like during the webinar, please feel free to post questions and we will try to answer as many as we can at the end. The presentation and recording of this session will be shared to you in next 24 to 48 hours. So with that, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce you to today's session speaker and my colleague, Mr. Sai Gunaranjan. Sai brings over 10 plus years of experience in the IT industry and is a technical architect at Winwire Technologies. He is a Microsoft specialist in Azure infrastructure and architecting Azure solutions. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Sai. Sai, over to you.
Thank you very much, Noor. Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar. As Noor mentioned, this webinar we are going to be talking about Azure Resource Manager and also Azure Resource Manager templates and how we can adopt, how we can use, and also what are the benefits of these platforms and how it will actually help us deploy resources as well as manage resources on Azure Cloud Platform. So the agenda for this discussion would primarily be we're going to start off with introduction of Azure, how it actually Azure Resource Manager, how it actually came in and when it actually came in, the benefits of Azure Resource Manager, how to author Azure Resource Manager templates and the multiple deployment options that we have, and also a short demo of how we can actually deploy resources into Azure Cloud Service using ARM. Now, to start off with the Azure Resource Manager, so prior to the Azure Resource Manager platform being available, we had the classic portal or the Azure Service Management layer, which we used to deploy and manage resources. It was effective and very good if we had a very few number of resources being deployed, but if you wanted to try a large-scale deployment of 500 or even 1,000 services and devices on Azure, it would actually be a challenge to programmatically deploy these and also to manage these programmatically. Now, that's when Azure Resource Manager came into picture, and way back in build 2014, it was first announced Azure Resource Manager. This is actually an API layer that actually allows us to connect to Azure resources and also configure and deploy Azure resources. So this layer or this Azure Resource Manager layer actually provides us with a new way to deploy and manage solutions as a group, and the deployment of resources can be coordinated using JSON-based templates, also known as ARM templates or Azure Resource Manager templates. So we can actually use Azure Resource Manager to provision any resources and other services on the Azure subscription. Azure Resource Manager is accessible. This API layer is accessible via multiple tools as well as the web portal. So the management layer can be accessed using Azure PowerShell, Azure command line interface for Macintosh, for Linux, or for Windows machines. Also the web portal, that's the portal.azure.com. And also the REST API, that's the RESTful APIs that are available on Azure. And the Azure Stack actually comes with, Azure Stack, which is the private cloud implementation of Azure, comes with inbuilt support for ARM, that's Azure Resource Manager. The same templates and commands work seamlessly on both the public as well as private cloud instances, making this an added advantage. So if your organization is having a private instance of Azure as well as a public instance of Azure, the same commands and the same templates would work seamlessly across both of these platforms, making it more easy and accessible for deployment and management. So most of us have actually been using Azure for some time now and are very familiar with the Azure Service Management or the classic portal, and must be thinking, why should we switch on to Azure Resource Manager, or why should we start using the new portal? So we're going to talk about a few very good benefits that Azure Resource Manager provides us with. One of the latest and the new benefits that are actually available are the Azure Resource Locks, which an administrator of a certain resource can lock the resource, and only he or the subscription owner can modify or delete it, and thus preventing any accidental deletions or modifications of Azure of resources on the Azure portal. It also comes with role-based access control natively integrated into the portal, by which we can provide granular access to resources and logical groups that are configured or deployed on Azure. So earlier, using the classic portal, this wasn't possible. You only could provide either administrator, co-administrator level of access, and by that everyone would have access to the complete portal. But using the role-based access, they can restrict administrators or users to certain resources or certain resource groups, or also provide access to the complete portal if required. We can monitor, deploy, and manage all resources from a single portal, and we don't need to navigate multiple options. All the settings, all the diagnostic logging, everything is available on one single web page, which we can just browse through and then configure everything automatically. We also can use declarative templates, also called as the ARM templates, that we can use to deploy multiple resources on the platform, wherein we can configure those templates to declaratively and programmatically deploy resources based on our need, and also sequentially keep on deploying the resources. And one of the features that wasn't available on the classic portal was to view rolled up costs based on either the resource or resource group. Now, using the new portal, we actually can get a snapshot of the utilization of every resource group, as well as the resource, and what is it consuming over the last billing cycle, and how much it's going to consume as well. And it also enables us to group multiple resources into a single logical unit and manage that unit or manage that group more effectively. We also can use the declarative templates to repeatedly deploy solutions throughout the development lifecycle, and hence ensuring that we have a consistent deployment across multiple platforms on Azure. So if you are having a test and a dev environment on Azure, we can ensure that the dev as well as the test environments are consistently being deployed, and there is no change in the configuration of either the machines or the services or any other resources that have been deployed. And we also can set a sequence for deployment of the resources using the declarative templates again. So in case you want to deploy a certain resources first and then sequence it with other resources, for example, if you wanted to create a virtual network, a subnet, a storage account, and then a virtual machine, you can actually declare that in the template, and using that sequence, only those resources would get deployed. So adoption of Azure Resource Manager. So now Azure Resource Manager SDK are actually available for multiple languages and platforms. Each of these languages are available through their ecosystem as well as on GitHub. For the SDK for .NET is available as a set of NuGet packages. The Java SDK is available on the GitHub Azure Java SDK repository, and Azure platform is also completely accessible using ARM's RESTful API methodology. So now that we have the basic understanding of what is ARM, what are the templates, and what are the benefits that it actually can provide us, we will talk about how to author these templates and what are the prerequisites to author these templates. We'll also talk about how to plan these templates, and we'll see how to deploy these templates as well. So the prerequisites to author these templates, first thing would be to get an Azure subscription. So we could sign up for a trial subscription for 1 month on portal.azure.com. If you navigate to the portal, you can sign up for a free trial, and you get 30 days of access to Azure platform. You can use Visual Studio 2012 and above with an SDK, Azure SDK, or any other text editor that you're comfortable with to edit these template files. And finally, we would be needing PowerShell, which we can actually configure to deploy the templates onto Azure subscription. So now that we have the prerequisites with us, we have to plan for the template that we're going to be using and how we're going to deploy it onto our Azure subscription. So first thing we need to do is plan for the resources and plan for the type of resources that we're going to deploy. So are we going to deploy virtual machine? Are we going to deploy a SQL database? Are we going to deploy just a storage account? What are we exactly going to deploy? And where will those resources actually reside? Which subscription, which location, which data center? We can actually configure to that level as well. And then we need to also take into consideration the resource provider API. So every resource provider has their own version of API. We need to take into consideration, and the latest versions of API have come with more features. So we need to plan and check for which version of the API that we will be using to deploy our resources. And the next important task would be also to plan for the sequence of resource deployment. So as we spoke earlier, if you wanted to first deploy a network, we have to actually sequence it out in the template. And then we will be declaring variables in the template, declaring and defining variables in the template. If we have multiple, so for example, if we have the subnet that is being called multiple times during the resource deployment, we can actually declare that subnet as a variable and then call that variable during the deployment rather than calling the subnet name, thus preventing any kind of manual errors or any typological errors. And then the final one would be the output of the template. We can actually configure what is the output that we would like to see after the template has been deployed. It could actually give us a summary of the deployment and provide us with the host name, the username, the IP address of the machine or the resource that has been deployed onto Azure. So authoring Azure templates, this template actually contains a total of 6 elements. The schema is a location of the JSON schema file. The content version will be the version of the schema that we are going to be using. The parameter section of the file actually contains all the parameters that are going to be configured during deployment. So either we could define parameters using the default parameter value, or we could leave it as a string value and then key in those parameters while we are deploying that file into Azure. The variables are, as we spoke earlier, are actually declarative definitions that we would be declaring during the portal on the JSON file, and we would be calling those variables throughout our resource deployment. The resources section of the file has all the resources that are going to be deployed as part of the JSON template. And outputs, as we spoke earlier, are the values that are returned after deployment, and it's going to contain a short summary. It can contain a short summary of what has been deployed, and we could use that for reporting purposes and to also track what has actually happened over the deployment. Now that we have the template ready, we have the subscription, we have the template, and we also are aware of all the parameters and the variables that are to be deployed. We will look at what the multiple deployment options that are actually available on with us for Azure portal. So one is directly log into the portal, the web portal.azure.com, and browse into the new section and upload the template over there, and then you can directly deploy it using the web portal. The next one would be the Azure PowerShell, wherein we will be using the commandlet new-Azure RM resource group deployment, followed by the name of the deployment, the Azure group name, the resource group name, as well as the template file, which we would be deploying onto the portal. Azure CLIs, if you're using any Linux or Macintosh-based machines, you could, and if you have Azure CLI, we could use Azure Group Deployment create command, followed by the JSON file, followed by the resource group name, and also followed by the name of the deployment. So by providing the name of a deployment, we could actually track it on the portal and see how the deployment has actually progressed, if there's any errors or if there's any problems with the deployment. And again, using ARM RESTful APIs, the REST API, we could configure the APIs to the subscription ID, also provide the resource group name and then the deployment name, wherein we can, using this API, we can deploy resources onto Azure portal. Click to deploy is one of the easiest methods to deploy resources onto Azure, wherein we can get into GitHub, the Azure quick start templates, look for the template that we want for that suits our needs best, and then once we open up the template, we could click on the button which says click to deploy, and that would automatically get deployed onto our Azure portal, onto Azure subscription. Now, before the deployment actually happens, we do have an option to edit the template and also provide any additional parameters or any additional variables that we would like to take into consideration. And then the final one is using Visual Studio, wherein once we have the SDK and the required components installed, we could create a new JSON file, and directly using Visual Studio and logging into Azure, we can directly deploy the resources onto Azure subscription. So we're going to quickly move on to the demo. So this is the GitHub repository for all the Azure Quick Start templates that are actually available for us. So these templates go from the easy ones, that are the 101s, and then they actually from there navigate into getting more complex and more advanced. So 101 are simple ones, creating any existing virtual machines or using any custom image disks and all of those things, and creating simple machines, Linux machines, Windows machines. From the 200 series, they keep on getting more and more complex, and it gets into load balancer, it gets into multiple deployment, and also the VMSS deployment, and also deployment of multiple machines at the using one template. So for our demo, we're going to click on. We're actually going to be using a simple Windows image, and this is actually the JSON template file, which we would be using to deploy into our Azure. So we'll quickly go through the JSON file, and we'll actually go through this. We'll see all that has actually been covered over here, and then from there on, we can actually go to the Azure portal and edit these parameters and also use it for deployment. So as we spoke earlier, the schema version is configured over here, and we also have the content version configured over here. And then from there on, we have the parameters. So in this template, we have the admin username parameter, which is right now a string, and it is not having any default value. So when we are going to deploy this template, it's going to ask us to enter a value. And then we have an admin password. Since suppose it's going to be a single deployment, we can definitely have it empty, so that we could key it in while we are deploying this template. But then if you're going to use this for multiple deployments, what you could do is you can configure a default value, and that will actually take the default value as part of the deployment into Azure portal as well. The DNS label prefix is nothing but the DNS value for the machine and how it will be accessible on the internet. Again, as usual, this is not having a default value as well. So we can either leave it like this, or we can also configure a default value and we can use it for multiple programmatical deployments. In this case, the OS version we're going to be using is, so we have a default value, it's going to be 2012. And also we have allowed value section. This basically this gives us a drop down and an option to select any of these 3 operating systems for our deployment. Now, coming to the variable section. So as you can see, this variable section talks about the storage account that we're going to be using, the disk size that we're going to be having, the name of the VHD that's going to get created, and from there on every other parameter. So we have the network, the NIC card name, that's a network interface card name. We have the address prefix, we have the subnet as well as the subnet name declared, and then we also have the storage account type. So if you notice the storage account type, it is created as standard LRS. And if we require to use a premium storage, or if you want to use any other kind of replication service, we can definitely modify this parameter to fit our requirements. And then we have the machine size. Machine size over here is a standard D1, and if we require to use a different machine size, we can definitely key in that. So we can go for a DS series or D2, the DSB2 series, or any other series that are actually meet our requirements. And then from there we have the resources section. This actually talks about all the resources that are going to get deployed. So as you can see, we're going to first deploy the storage account, and then we're going to be deploying the public IP address, and then from there the network interface as well as the subnet, and then finally we're going to have the network interfaces, and then finally we're going to be having the machine configured as well. So since the virtual machine needs all of these components, we'll have to first create all of these components, and only then we can create a virtual machine. And then virtual machine would have all of the above parameters filled in over here, from the OS test to the storage profile to the networking details and everything, which will be actually available over here. And another thing I would like to highlight over here is on the resource manager management layer, we have a diagnostic profile that can be configured. So as part of this template, we would be only configuring the boot diagnostics, but if you want any advanced metrics and advanced diagnostics to be configured, this section would be the best for us to configure these things as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back on this, and we're going to click on the click to deploy. So once we click on the click to deploy, as you can see, it has automatically kind of redirected me to the Azure portal, and then from there it's going to launch up the Azure template custom deployment option as well. So here we have an option: either we could enter the parameters that are required, or we can edit our template to fulfill our requirements. So we'll go to parameter section, and what we're going to do is we're going to put in a default value, and then we're going to type in a demo admin would be the username or the administrative account for this virtual machine. And the password for now, I'm going to leave it blank. And what we'll do is for the DNS prefix, what we'll do is we'll also type in a default value, which would be something like maybe something like this, and make sure that this is actually a unique variable, because if this is not a unique variable, the template would not be able to throw an error saying it's not unique. But then when you go for the deployment, the deployment will error out saying that the DNS prefix is not unique. And also we need to take a note that the DNS cannot have any numbers or any numerical values at the starting. So we'll always have to start with an alphabet. So we can save this. And if you want to reuse this template, once we save it, you also can download this template and reuse it multiple times. So So in case you want to programmatically deploy this using any kind of the PowerShell, we can definitely use that as well. So once we have it saved, we can come back to our edit parameters over here. As you can see, all of these have automatically been filled in based on the template that we have provided. I'll just go ahead and provide a quick password. And I'm going to click on OK. So for now, we won't be creating, so we also actually can kind of declare this resource group into the template as well. But for now, we will not do that. We will go ahead and just create a new template, a new resource group. And then we'll accept the terms, and we can click on create once that is done. Then we can click on, and once that's done, we can click on create. It gets into validation stage, and then after the validation, it would automatically start the deployment. So as you can see, the deployment has been initiated, and within a few minutes, you'll have the deployment ready. I'll also quickly show about the PowerShell. So I did download the template earlier, and this is the PowerShell model that's available. So once we log into Azure PowerShell, we will select our subscription that we're going to be working on, and then we'll actually provide the deployment name, the resource group name, as well as the template that we're going to be deploying. So once we can actually select this and run this command, automatically the PowerShell will log in, and then we actually deploy all of these requirements onto the portal, and then it will respond back with an output file, and output will contain all the parameters that have just been deployed onto the portal. That's it we had for this demo. We'll move on to Q&A. So any questions, anything which we can help you answer?
Thanks, Sai. Thanks for the quick session as well as the wonderful demo. As you know, like we have a couple of more minutes. Yes, I would like to quickly take a few questions before we wrap up. So the first question is, can we declare monitoring parameters in the template?
Yes. So as we just saw a few minutes back, yes, we can declare monitoring templates in the, monitoring parameters in the template. We can actually declare the CPU, memory, as well as other parameters that are available as part of the Azure platform.
Thanks, Sai. So the other question is it possible to create multiple resources using the same properties?
Yes. So as part of the programmatical deployment options available on the template, we can actually create multiple similar resources using the same parameters, same subnet, same virtual machine, and also sequentially increase the DNS names and the host names so that it will actually create all of them automatically rather than having to and input those details multiple times into the system.
Thanks, Sai. So the other question is, can I link or have nested templates?
Yes, that's actually a very good question. JSON templates or the ARM templates do support the feature and functionality wherein one template can call another template. That's completely possible, and that's doable. That we actually do that as part of large deployments, wherein if you want to deploy multiple resources as sequentially and as part of a single deployment.
Thanks, Sai. So the last question I would like to take is, you did mention about the ARM authoring supporting Visual Studio. I just wanted to check if it supports Visual Studio 2012.
Yes, it does support Visual Studio 2012. We can author ARM templates as long as we have the SDK, Azure SDK installed on the machine.
Thanks, I know we are almost there. Again, thanks everyone for taking time to join this webinar session. And I hope you found it informative and useful. Again, we are hosting a similar topic next week on DevOps and Visual Studio team services at 9 AM Pacific time. and we look forward for you folks to join again. In case if you have any further questions, I would request you to write to us at marketing@winwire.com, and we will take those questions offline. Thanks everyone for taking time to join this session, and have a wonderful day. Thanks, Sai.
Thank you, everyone.